What is up, Steeler fans? Welcome back to another episode of State of the Steelers. Wow, what a bunch of breaking news that happened today. Some news that I didn't think we were probably going to be hearing. Sorry about that, yo. But apparently, the Pittsburgh Steelers, have traded Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles for a couple of swap picks. They ended up getting switching out a fourth for a third. And now the Pittsburgh Steelers have 2 third-round picks. But how did this happen? Why did this happen? You know, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been talking throughout this entire offseason that Kenny Pickett was going to be the guy, or at least he was going to be given the opportunity to be the guy. There was going to be a competition. But like I mentioned in my video earlier, I've come to realize when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, you got to watch what they do, not listen to what they say, because oftentimes what they say and what they do are two different things. The greatest point example, and it fooled me, was I was pretty positive or fairly positive that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to be bringing back Mason Rudolph, given the high praise they gave him at the end of the season, and given the fact that, he did well. You can't account or discount what he did at the end of the season, and I thought that the Steelers might feel like they could bring him back as that competition for Kenny Pickett. But all along, it kind of seems like maybe there wasn't that, what's the word I'm looking for, faith in Kenny Pickett as was put out there. I questioned it a couple of weeks ago. I asked, is the faith in Kenny Pickett real? And the reason why I questioned it was for numerous reasons. One was, the fact that they were going to be bringing on the competition, the fact that, or the words that they used in press conferences, especially coming from Art Rooney, the owner. And when he said that, Mason Rudolph gave them a chance to see what a good quality quarterback or good playing quarterback could do with the offense that they had. Those were shots, in my opinion, towards Kenny Pickett. So the Pittsburgh Steelers go out. They end up signing Russell Wilson. That breaks out this week. And all indications are, and if you guys aren't aware, if you guys don't know, I'm a part of Steel Curtain Network. Well, there is SteelCurtainNetwork.com, but I'm part of Steel Curtain Network, formerly of Behind the Steel Curtain. And there is a source. I'm aware of who the source is and things of that nature. And I would say that, the information that does come from them is pretty legit. They had been saying something to the effect that they're going to give Kenny Pickett every opportunity to be the starter, and they have faith in him. And I think that was true to a certain extent. I don't think that any source is going to be lying or anything like that, but I don't think that the Steelers are going to want, coming out of their camp, a narrative that they want to move on from Kenny Pickett, because that devalues, what his worth is or what his trade capital could have been. And so let's find out what happened, right? We'll go through a couple of tweets that went on throughout the day from insiders of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we'll see if we can get this somewhat figured out, so to speak. And Evan Ford comes in saying, smash that like button. Please smash the like button, hit the subscribe, ring that notification bell. So this went out earlier this morning. Wilson went out to dinner last night with James Harrison, Connor Hayward, Charlie Batch, among others. Now, if you guys haven't seen Russell Wilson's press conference, I recommend going and watching that. He talked highly about how many players called him up, were, basically asking him to join the Steelers, campaigning for him to join the team, including Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, and others, some of the captains of the team, so to speak. Did that play a role in potentially Kenny Pickett allegedly requesting a trade? Maybe. But my thing is, if you have other players, campaigning for a player who's not on your team, and, you have a guy that the Steelers have drafted in the first round who had been the starter for the last 2 years outside of games when he was injured. And not to mention Cam Hayward is also locker mates right next door to Kenny Pickett. It just doesn't seem, I think they know football too, If they're going out there and asking for somebody else to come in, I just don't think they have the faith in Kenny Pickett as well. So that was one big, I guess, clue, so to speak, that the Steelers were going to be moving on from him. A little bit later, Chris Adamski comes in with saying that, during Russell Wilson's press conference, Russell Wilson mentioned speaking with Kenny Pickett. He texted him. He said that, let's make this team better. Let's do it. It was positive. Russell Wilson said that he had texted Kenny, quote, "Hey, every day we go out here, let's just be the best versions of ourselves and make the team better." That was one of the things that Russell Wilson was really doing well was dodging those Kenny Pickett questions. And he mentioned that he was going to be just competing against himself. And I guess at this right now, he's the only quarterback on the team. So I guess he wasn't lying there when he said that. But he did talk about talking to Kenny and said that it was a positive, situation there with the text messages. Wasn't anything bad. That's the same one. Let me move forward one more. Then all of a sudden we get the message. Boom. After Russell Wilson comes off of his press conference, we get Adam Schefter coming in saying the Steelers are sending Kenny Pickett to Philadelphia in a pick swap, sources say. And so the Steelers ended up getting the Eagles' 3rd round pick this year. They give the Eagles one of their 4th round picks, and then they get a pair of 7th round picks next season. The compensation, in my opinion, is pretty low. So that could be an indication that this happened fairly quickly. This wasn't a situation where Kenny Pickett was asking for a trade since the offseason. I think that this was something that he may have asked for recently. So let's continue. And this is, basically what I just said, what they're acquiring. The Steelers are going to get number 98 overall, and they're giving 120. The Steelers had 2 4th round picks before, and not anymore, obviously, now. Then Gary Dulac came out with this interesting tweet. He said that the Steelers made the move because the way Pickett was poorly handling the arrival of Russell Wilson. According to sources, that came on the heels of Pickett's behavior last season when he refused to dress as the emergency 3rd quarterback in Seattle in Week 17. I know that, DK from DK Sports had an article written earlier today that the reason why that Kenny Pickett didn't dress was because he would have had to have taken a shot, which was painful and things like that. And that would have had to have been done prior to the game. And, he was essentially going to be the 3rd string quarterback. So I kind of took that as a possibility, but there had been rumors going on that Pickett had refused to dress. And if you remember, the day after the game against Seattle, Kenny Pickett was 100%. He was ready to go. They cleared him of everything to play and everything else. And so the story came out from Mark Madden that Kenny Pickett completely refused to dress and that he was basically acting like a baby. Then you had other media and Steelers insiders coming forward. Some of them saying, yeah, there could be some truth to that. Others saying, no, it's not exactly what it was. And we never really got the real truth about that situation. But according to Gary Dulac, who is and has sources close to the team, it does sound like maybe perhaps there was more to Pickett's behavior throughout the year. I had heard a rumor also, it's just a rumor, that early on when Matt Canada was on the team, that Kenny Pickett expressed his frustrations with the coaches and basically blamed the coaches, maybe not blame the coaches for his failures, but based on what I heard, it kind of sounded like he did. And regardless of anything else, I used to play football, and it just seems kind of weird when a player is blaming the coach. I understand outside folks, you know what I mean? Like fans, you and I, we can go in there and say, man, this coach sucks. That's the reason why. But every time I've seen a situation where players are like, hey, when the players play, the coach is coach, and, one person did this wrong or the execution was wrong, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem right to throw blame somewhere else. There's no accountability, in my opinion, is kind of where I'm going there. If that ends up being the case, again, I'm not sure how true it is. Was a Steelers fan, now an Eagles fan, Jim? Oh, okay. So Albert Breer comes out and says no promises were made by the Steelers on starting jobs and told veterans are usually get the first crack at the first spring. And so the plan was for Russell Wilson to begin with that and for there to be a quarterback competition with Kenny Pickett from there. So he's claiming here in this tweet, and there's been some tweets going back and forth that Pickett was told that Russell Wilson was going to be the starter. And I think that there is some evidence to maybe not that Russell Wilson was going to be the starter, but that there was going to be a change in the quarterback room. And it goes back to the exit interviews with the media this past January, when you had Cam Hayward and other players come forward and talk to the media at the end. And usually it's the starters and those that you expect to be starting in the following year. And Kenny Pickett skipped out on it. Now, it's not mandatory, any of those things, but he was the guy that I think most people would have thought that he would have been at that meeting. And he didn't. I think that maybe perhaps he was told something in his exit interview with the team that he didn't like. And if that ends up being the case, this is starting to develop a little bit of a habit here. Not willing to dress, being upset, whatever news he may have gotten in his exit meeting, now he's not willing to meet with the media. So just something that I'm putting together, thinking about myself here. Tom Pelissero tweeted, how did this go sideways? Mike Tomlin had promised Kenny Pickett to get a chance to compete. Pickett learned about Russell Wilson signing on social media Sunday night. And when they spoke next morning, Tomlin told Pickett that Wilson was in pole position and would get first reps. So Pickett asked for a trade, and now he's an Eagle. This wouldn't be the first time, to be honest with you, that a player is a little bit disgruntled because they said that they were told something and something else different was done. You can think of, like, for instance, Melvin Ingram. It seemed like he thought, well, maybe not him, because I don't think he's a great example. I think they did tell him that he was going to have an opportunity to get reps, but he had to beat out Alex Highsmith, and he just didn't do that. But, maybe there is a situation here where, they went back on what they had told him. I don't know. Also, I had heard that they had spoken and called Pickett and told him about Russell Wilson. Not so much that he found out about this on social media. So I find that to be, I don't know. I don't know how true this one is. Then you had Aditi Kinkubala. I'm just going to call her Aditi from here forward. She stated, note preferred, it's not because Kenny Pickett is running away from competition. He explicitly was told by the Steelers Wilson would start, reigning on the pledge he'd been given after 2 years of chaos. He'd finally be put in a position to succeed, per sources apprised the conversation. So here Aditi is saying that she is being told that Wilson was going to get the start, but that was not something, was ever disclosed or said by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, they never said that Wilson was going to start. In fact, they kept saying that this was going to be a competition, ever since the end of the season. They mentioned that Kenny Pickett was going to have strong competition. And to me, it just seems like that was something that he was not willing to do. Maybe because, like you mentioned, Adita kind of alludes here that, he's going into his fourth year. Well, you know what? There's another one. Maybe it's on that one. All right, so this is somebody else talking to him. And I'll read this in a second, but if Kenny Pickett ends up, would have stayed and lost the job to Russell Wilson, he's probably not getting his fifth year signed, obviously. He's going into his fourth year. I don't know if he's going to be the guy, the future. Right now the Steelers have one quarterback on the team. Even if Kenny Pickett was there, typically the Steelers go into training camp with 4 QBs. Now, I can predict one of those QBs was probably going to be an undrafted guy, right? But then there's still room for a current, opening there because, like I said, they usually go in with 4. So I felt like the Steelers were probably going to draft a guy. Now with this news with Kenny Pickett out and in Philadelphia, I think that urgency for the quarterback position is increased. You know, what faith do the Steelers have in Russell Wilson? Right now, they only gave him a 1-year prove it deal. And so they have nothing for the future. And I think that there's a possibility here that the Steelers could target quarterback early on in the draft. Now, if they don't target quarterback early on the draft and Mike Tomlin still has not yet signed his extension, I believe that's some sort of indication that this may be Mike Tomlin's last year. And they don't want to get a quarterback until they have the coach of the future to make that decision. I think they made a huge mistake by allowing Kevin Colbert to pick the Pittsburgh Steelers, heir apparent or the QB of the future in his final draft. I apologize for that, guys. I have no idea what happened. I hope I didn't lose too many of you guys, but let's get back into this. I forgot where I was at, or what you guys may or may not have heard. But what I said was that the quarterback position, in my opinion, is going to be a huge position going into the draft this year. Now, I think that right now, Mike Tomlin hasn't signed his extension. It has not happened. And again, this is a situation where you watch what they do, not listen to what they say. They've been saying that they were going to sign him for a while, but there's been rumblings, for some time now that Mike Tomlin might be taking some time off here relatively soon. Now, I think he's going to coach this year. He's been open about that he's going to be the coach for this season. I do think that there's a possibility that, the Steelers, it looks like they're cleaning house. They're getting rid of everybody or anybody that was associated or brought in by Kevin Colbert. Omar Khan is really leaving his fingerprints on this. And I think that if Mike Tomlin hasn't gotten an extension by the time the draft comes, and if the Steelers don't draft a quarterback in the top 3 rounds, that's 4 opportunities there. I think that's probably some writing on the wall that this could be Mike Tomlin's last ride with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think maybe perhaps they learned their lesson when it came to Kevin Colbert and allowing somebody that is walking out of the building to make such an important decision in an important position. And instead, maybe have somebody who's going to be a part of that decision, in the building and making that decision. You know what I'm saying? So, that's just my food of thought. I do think that there is the possibility that he ends up staying, but I find it odd that he hasn't been extended yet. This has been something, like I said, they've been saying since the beginning, and they have been talking about how urgent it was to extend Mike Tomlin, given the fact that, they were looking for an offensive coordinator, and they knew that the offensive coordinator position would, to bring in somebody would require some sort of stability there at the head coach position. He hasn't been extended, so it'd be interesting to see how this ends up turning out. Who knows? Maybe by tomorrow he ends up getting an extension, and then, there goes that. But if he doesn't have one, this is only if he doesn't by the time the draft comes, and he doesn't target that position early on, I think that's a pretty big clue. He may be just finishing out his current contract and, reflecting those questions about retirement or moving on or doing something different until next year, when it's not going to affect the team he's currently coaching. So I'll take some of y'all's questions if you have any, guys. Let's hear put some stars on there. It'll help me see them. But yeah, Omar Khan ain't playing. No, he isn't. Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties. Ragu says maybe Kenny did not think he could beat out Russ. I don't think it's so much about a situation with competition in the NFL. 100%. I think that there's a business aspect of it, because if it was 100% on who's better, I don't think that Mason Rudolph would have been QB3 in the last 2 years. I'm not saying he would have been QB1 in in 2022 when Kenny Pickett was drafted, and it was, between Kenny and Mitch and Mason. Although, and I was there, I was at training camp, it did appear that Mason was doing a little bit better than the other guys, but it kind of felt like a situation where he was doing better because he had been there longer, right? I believe I compared it to like a marathon, where you have Mason Rudolph, who's been there longer. He's knows the offense. He's probably a little bit up ahead when the start of that marathon starts, and you have some new guys to the team. They're probably in the back. Now, if Mason Rudolph's a strong runner, he's going to stay up there. And if he's not, and you have a strong runner in the back, he's eventually going to pass that runner. And so I thought that even though Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky were maybe not playing to the same level as Mason Rudolph, I figured they would surpass him. I was wrong about that. And it was clear last season, and this past season, who was probably the best quarterback. Now, does that mean that Mason Rudolph is a franchise quarterback? I don't think so. I don't think the rest of the NFL thinks that either. That's why he went and signed for $3 million to be the backup in Tennessee. I wish him the best. I really was hoping that he would be the guy that was going to give Pickett that competition, because I felt that was probably going to be the only way there was going to be a competition in the quarterback room. I felt if the Steelers brought in Ryan Tannehill, who was a guy that was who's a quarterback that worked under Arthur Smith, who had his best stats as a starting quarterback in the NFL under Arthur Smith as his offensive coordinator. He knows his offense. I felt that would probably make Arthur Smith maybe sway more towards Ryan Tannehill as being his starter versus Kenny Pickett. And if you were to have gone to Russell Wilson, as the Steelers did, I thought that you don't make a move for Russell Wilson if he's not going to start, regardless of what you're paying him. And then the other big name is trading for Justin Fields. Now, if you're going to trade for Justin Fields, you got to probably sign the 5th-year option, which is going to turn into quite a bit of money. And you really don't know what you have in him, so he's probably going to end up getting the opportunity to play, especially because of the financial aspect of it. So unless it was, in my opinion, somebody random like maybe Sam Darnold or a Flacco, I think that if they would have brought, the Steelers would have brought somebody that could have really pushed Kenny Pickett for competition, then it wasn't going to be a competition. That whoever they brought in was going to be that guy. But we'll see. We'll see how the Steelers handle it. Right now, they only have one quarterback on the roster. I anticipate them getting one in the draft. I would prefer they get one relatively sooner than later. Russell Wilson's up there in age. He's not the future. Maybe perhaps he has a good year this year. But how many more years do you think you can get out of Russ? Russ has a specific type of game. He likes to get out of the pocket, make things happen with his legs, and throw the ball down the field. He's one of the quarterbacks that has one of the longer snap to pass timing rates, and a lot of that has to do with because he's making things happen. He's very backyard football-esque in that manner. And given his age and size and the length of the season, 17 games, how many more years can you really expect? So I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers really do need to target the quarterback position. If not this year, for sure next year. And the question is, did the Steelers learn their lesson by waiting till the absolute moment to, look at the position? When it came to Ben Roethlisberger, they waited for him to retire before they went out and acquired a quarterback or even, looked into the position as a possibility in earlier drafts. And they end up putting themselves in a situation where they needed a quarterback when the quarterbacks in the quarterback class that Kenny was drafted in wasn't the best. It was one of the statistically, well, I guess one of the worst ones ever. And in fact, the only quarterback I think that is playing at any, playing well is obviously Brock Purdy. Every other quarterback that has been drafted from there is, I don't even think majority of them are on the same team. Kenny Pickett left. Sam Howell was traded. Desmond Ridder is no longer with the Falcons. So some of those top guys in this draft aren't even on the same team just 2 years later. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But I got faith that, I think when it comes to Russell Wilson, I don't got faith in him yet. Let me rephrase that. He's starting to win me over, so to speak. And the reason being is just, some of the things that he's doing, the way he's acting on social media and some of the things that he's saying. It's all the right stuff, right? He's coming out on his Twitter with him in a Steelers uniform, and then he posts out this awesome video with Renegade playing in the background, the fans cheering, and then he shows off the number 3 Wilson jersey. Patrick Queen ends up being the largest free agent signing that the Pittsburgh Steelers have ever made, and he's welcoming him to the Pittsburgh Steelers and looking forward to what they can do. And I hadn't seen anything like that from a Steelers quarterback. One, mainly because Ben Roethlisberger wasn't the online persona type of guy. And, I don't know about Kenny Pickett if he is or not, but I just never saw that type of, stuff coming out of his camp. And I'll be honest, it kind of fired me up a little bit. I liked it. I liked Russell Wilson doing that. He comes out there and he says all the right things in his press conference today. Talks about being, his best self and competing to be the best self and make the team better. And, never really saying that it's about him. And, I'm excited. I think he's starting to win me over. I got to see him actually on the field, to be honest with you, to see what he can do. I started to break down some film of Russell Wilson last year. Go check that out. I broke down, what was it? The Kansas City Chief game where they won. Now in that game, a big contributor to the Denver Broncos winning that game was the turnovers. However, Russell Wilson had something like 3 touchdowns and 115 yards or something like that. Not very many yards, but he had a lot of short fields. He also had a lot of sacks. I think he was sacked 16. He was sacked 6 times in that game. When I went back to watch it, I was a little bit so-so on it. I felt that receivers really weren't getting open, and the play calls were Canada-esque, to be honest with you. Now, I don't think that Sean Payton and Matt Canada are on the same level of play calling, but I think that there may have been a sabotage going on there in Denver when it came to Russell Wilson by giving him plays that were, make you scratch your head. Like, for instance, go routes at the 15-yard line in the red zone. That didn't make any sense. Things like that. The routes were repeated, stuff like that. And when it came to, Matt Canada, everybody booed him out of there. I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's Sean Payton's offense is anything like Canada's. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of sabotage, given the fact that Russell Wilson really wasn't Sean Payton's guy. He wasn't Nathaniel Hackett's guy either. In fact, they wanted Aaron Rodgers, and they ended up not getting Aaron Rodgers and settled in for Russell Wilson. So here in Pittsburgh, by all accounts, he was only supposed to go in for a couple minutes on a few of these interviews, and end up spending a few hours. It looks like he's the Steelers guy. And so maybe perhaps he can have that turnaround, have that Kurt Warner-esque into his career, so to speak. Let's see. I'm going to go through some of the comments here. Kenny is a steal. He just didn't want to fight for his job. But that's a concern. He's supposed to be a leader, a captain. It doesn't matter who you bring. Even if the Steelers would have gone out there and drafted a first-round quarterback, he should have had the the moxie and the confidence to say, I don't care who you bring, I'm going to beat whoever it is. And we didn't see that. And to be honest with you, given all the other little tidbits of information that we've heard about his attitude and confidence, and or maybe not confidence, but his, I don't want to call him a crybaby, but it just kind of sounds like it. Maybe he's just not the right guy for the Steelers. Now he's going to Philadelphia. I don't know if he's going to be competing there with Jalen Hurts. I doubt it. I doubt there's going to be a actual competition there, but he is with the team that he loved while he was growing up. It was different when Mason came in. It said it all to me. And I think that said a lot for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. They knew what they had in Mason. They knew who he was and who he wasn't. And when that guy started to outperform Kenny Pickett, and it's not saying anything or taking anything bad on Mason, but, Mason is probably your average quarterback. He's probably number 25 or 20 in your top 32 quarterbacks. He can be a starter, in my opinion, but I don't think he's ever going to be anything like, elite, right? And he was looking really, really good compared to Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. So, you had possibly the Kinder Green, or what did I call it? The Kendrick Cole issue that's going on there, where you had Mason Cole replacing Kendrick Green and because of how bad Kendrick Green was, Mason Cole looked like an elite player at times, So I think that Mason Rudolph coming in and showing what he was able to do, I think pretty much sealed Pickett's fate. At the end of the day, you have to watch what they do, not listen to what they say, because at that time they were talking about Kenny being their number one QB. They didn't even change the depth chart. Remember how they still had him QB1 at the end of the year. But at the end of the day, they started Mason Rudolph multiple games while Kenny Pickett was healthy. So that should have probably been a huge, huge thing for us to see. I'm handy. They screwed Kenny last year when he got hurt, and then started Mason when he recovered. Finally got rid of Canada, and he led them to 420 plus yards when he was hurt. I don't deny the fact that maybe perhaps Canada had some sort of influence on the outcome when it came to Kenny Pickett. But Kenny Pickett did have a game without Canada, and it was against one of those defenses that Mason Rudolph ended up facing that everybody said was a bad defense and were kind of talking him down upon, and that was the Cincinnati Bengals. And in that game, Kenny Pickett managed to put up 16 points, I believe, throughout 4 quarters. And Mason Rudolph, I think they scored over 30. Results do matter. And it wasn't something like I said in that game when we were watching it or when I was reviewing the tape that I thought Mason did anything spectacular. But he was able to put the ball in the hands of his playmakers, and they were able to do something great with it. He didn't have to be that guy that was fitting in balls in tight windows or throwing it on a line, things like that, or tricking the defense. He took what they gave him and he went forward. And the thing is, that's what you expect out of a quarterback, that's a game manager and or a backup. I was hoping he would be our guy. Last season, I'll be honest, Steelers get him and he starts off. I thought he was going to be better than Mitch Trubisky. I thought he should have started the year. I felt that regardless of what you paid Mitch, you ended up going up there and getting the first quarterback in the draft. Go play this guy. Let's see what he has. He's supposed to be NFL ready. He's old as majority of players he's as old as some of the players that were getting their second contract. In fact, Patrick Queen is 24 in his second contract, and he's younger than Kenny Pickett. So let's see what we have in him. And I'll be honest, first 4 games, I didn't like what I saw. I thought it was really, really bad. And throughout the last 7, 8, 10 games or whatever it was after the bye week, he started doing well. The Steelers ended up going 9-7. and almost making the playoffs, and or 9-8, almost making the playoffs. Although he was winning games and things like that, I was iffy on him. And I'll tell you when I actually lost confidence in Kenny Pickett was this year. Well, you know what? I'm going too far. Yeah, I thought that he did play better. I thought he got better at the end of last season. There was the Miami Dolphin game where he threw 2 interceptions at the end of the game, and then he found himself at the end of the game against the Raiders and a game again against the Ravens, where in the same situation he ended up scoring 2 touchdowns. So I thought he'd overcome those demons, the pressure at the end of the game. But he never got it off the ground when it came to the first 3 quarters. In fact, I don't think he ever played a full game as a Pittsburgh Steeler. And that concerned me. There were some things that I saw that he did somewhat better, but there was a lot of other things that never got developed. For instance, the zone, reading the zone, and if defensive changed what they were doing, at the snap of the ball, if they were showing cover 2, switch to cover 3 or cover 1 or anything in between, it took them a little bit longer to process that. And I never saw that get faster. And so I was concerned about that at the end of the year, but I thought maybe, full year, full off season, whole 9 yards, that maybe he comes back and he'll do well. And then he had the preseason, and I thought, hey, he got over it. He's the guy. He still had a little bit of the happy feet thing going on, but it wasn't as bad as it was his rookie year. And then preseason goes away, and it's back to square one. And a lot of the same issues that I never saw him overcome. I mean, there was a situation that I have broken down. I recommend going back and watching. It was against the Vegas Raiders, where there's a slant route to George Pickens where he would have gone to the house. And that's the call that's played. I believe that's the first look on the play, because that's the first look that Kenny Pickett does. George Pickens is the only player to the right side, and he turns to the right. He winds up. He's about to pass or throw the ball, and for whatever reason, he just kind of holds on to it, does this weird jump in the air. Nobody's around him. I think he assumed somebody was going to hit him, and then rolls out to the left. He ends up hitting Calvin Austin for a first down, but that could have gone for 6. And I don't understand why he didn't throw the ball. There was a lot of those type of situations that I continually kept seeing. And I don't understand why. Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe the 49ers, freaked him out. The speed of their defense was crazy. I just remember watching that game, and it seemed like the Pittsburgh Steelers were high schoolers playing against NFL pros who are just that much faster than them. I don't know, maybe that kind of screwed him up. Who knows? But, when I ended up just kind of saying, what, this definitely isn't the guy, was against the Green Bay Packers. In that game this year is where the entire secondary of the Green Bay Packers were depleted. They had practice squad guys out there. I was expecting Kenny Pickett to have a breakout game. And in that game, the special teams outscored the offense. They had that block punt that turned into a safety and all this other stuff, field goals. And that's when I was like, you know what? This guy is just, he's not the guy that I think that the Steelers want in the future. And I think that, the Steelers knew that. There was some rumors going on throughout the year that they were considering benching him and then firing Matt Canada instead. Not saying that was the wrong move. I think that both moves were probably correct, benching Kenny and firing Matt Canada. We saw the outcome of that at the end of the season. And, we can all go back and think what could have happened had they done it earlier, or had they, had Mason in there instead of Mitch Trubisky in those 3 games that, they slid against opponents that they should have won. I mean, who knows? Who knows where they would have ended up at? But yeah, I wanted the kid to work out. I don't think you ever want anybody not to work out. I'll be honest, I wasn't thrilled about the pick. When he came in, I wasn't thrilled about any quarterbacks. I didn't want any quarterbacks coming out of this draft. I was hoping that the Steelers would go with Mason Rudolph that year and then come in with a quarterback the following year, which would have been last year's draft. And I believe, and Nathan, I'm not sure if you're still in here or not, but I had told Nathan from in hindsight, I would have preferred that the Steelers went out and got maybe a Will Levis. And I thought that, he had some special talent with his arm, and that, I don't know if he could put it all together or not, but he had the tangibles. With Kenny Pickett, he has the intangibles. Maybe if you can combine both of them, you got yourself a quarterback. Let's see. Cool background. Thank you. I appreciate that. Please hit that like button and subscribe. What would you like to see happen for QB2 and QB3? Well, I think that they're probably going to go out. Here's what I would do. I'd go out there and get, obviously, somebody in free agency, and whoever that is going to be my QB2. And then if somebody were to fall, or there's an opportunity to move up in the first round to get one of these guys, and it doesn't have to be one of the top 3 guys. You have Russell Wilson this year. Maybe perhaps you can get somebody, a developmental guy. I know. I don't know. There's Bo Nix. The Steelers supposedly like him. To me, he seems like Kenny Pickett 2.0. Somebody that, got well at the end of his college career. And I don't know about his arm strength or anything like that. I thought he was a bigger dude. And then I was watching the Senior Bowl, and Mike Tomlin was talking to him, and they were about the same size. And I was like, I'm not big on short quarterbacks, to be honest with you. I like the typical prototype, 6'4" and up. Ben Roethlisberger type of quarterback. Even Mason, Brady. Bigger guys that were in the pocket and can read a defense, throw the ball down the field. The small, wirely guys. They play well. I mean, Russell Wilson's won a Super Bowl, so it's plausible. I just think that, me personally, I'd prefer the bigger quarterbacks. But I would prefer to see maybe somebody of the future, in the third QB spot. Because if they end up going out and getting a guy, let's just say they trade up and get somebody in the first round, like they did with Kenny Pickett, then I don't think the fans are going to be very patient when it comes to playing that guy. And, it didn't really work out the last time around. Not because it's the fans' fault or anything like that, but I do think that does play a role or a toll in the psyche of players' heads. If you're the starting quarterback and everybody's chanting for the third string guy or the backup, and booing you, even Mason, when he was just walking out on the field in preseason, he got booed for no reason, so I'm sure that plays some toll. These guys are human beings at the end of the day, so. I think to alleviate that, to not have to deal with that, unless the person that you're going up there is just hands down better and special and you have no choice, it's probably best to let that person learn the scheme. Let's see. Any chance the team, as anyone in the locker, is tired of 10 questions to 12 to anyone was Kenny. Local media made him a cancer, do you think? I mean, local media probably did play a toll, but I do think that Kenny Pickett played a bigger toll in why there's question marks, with him. And it's not just what he did on the field. If there's any truth, which I don't know, I wasn't there, but if there's any truth to his actions or behavior when it came down to him being the, third QB against Seattle, or him not being too thrilled about Russell Wilson and asking for a trade, then maybe perhaps there's some fire to that smoke, of him not being, the best fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm not sure, but I do think that it probably did play a role. The entire, he's put in a bad situation. Him and all the Steelers quarterbacks, they're following some pretty big footsteps in Ben Roethlisberger, and it's not just following what he did throughout his whole career. It's following what he did starting off his career. Ben Roethlisberger went, 15 games, won 14, 15 games in a row. His first year as a rookie, won a Super Bowl in his second year, made it to a second Super Bowl and 2 years after that, and a third 2 years after that. So that's That's some production and hardware. And that's going to be that's not very common. In fact, Ben Roethlisberger, I think Brock Purdy now has come pretty close to winning the same amount of games as a starter in his first year. But it's, how many years has gone by between Ben Roethlisberger and a quarterback that has done something similar? Since 2004 to 2022, it's 18 years. So, it's going to be difficult. But now that the Steelers have gone through two quarterbacks, Mitch Trubisky and now Kenny Pickett, who weren't up to that level, maybe that shadow isn't as big as it was before that it was for these guys. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see. We need to draft a QB and acquire someone else. I agree. Fields trade seems like it's coming, or is it just me? So that's a possibility. Justin Fields, his trade market has gone down significantly. Before, I think there was a rumor that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to offer a second and a fifth for him or something like that, and then they rescinded their offer. I think that the Bears were trying to get a little greedy and make up for the Chase Claypool trade. And it ended up costing them even more because the Steelers ended up going out and signing Russell Wilson. And now they can still probably end up acquiring a Justin Fields for maybe a 6th or a 7th round, especially if you're going to be paying him the amount of money that needs to be paid to him. Now, I don't think he's going to come in and automatically be given the 5th-year option. In fact, I don't think the Steelers are going to offer it to him. What they probably will do is offer him some sort of extension with money similar to what he's making this year, which I think was around 9-10 million, something like that. It's significantly less than the 25 million that he would have made had the Steelers signed his 5th-year option. So I think there's that possibility. I don't think anybody's going to go out there and give, Justin Fields $25 million a year. That's almost he has more turnovers than that, than millions of dollars that he makes. That's crazy. So, yeah, when you have a guy that has had 40 turnovers in a season or something like that, or 30 turnovers in a season, I don't think you're paying that person that much money, regardless of the team around them. All right. But if he does come, I do think that he's going to be relatively cheap, so to speak. But, the question is going to come up. Who do you start, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? And it's more than just the, who's the better player. We talked about that earlier. It's the NFL's a business as well. So you also have to do what's best for financially for the team. And are you going to play the player that you're paying, or are you going to play the player that's on a minimum vet deal, taking the names out of it? Play the player that has a potential future, or play the player who's just on one deal. And that, if that player ends up doing well, is not going to be the player of the future. So decisions the Steelers need to make, and it's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be an interesting offseason up until the draft. Oh, and by the way, happy birthday to Mike Tomlin. It's his birthday. I'm going to scroll through this a little bit faster real quick. Tomlin better produce because it appears no one is saved from the wrath of Khan. And that's one thing that I'm saying. He's on his last year of his contract. They've talked about extension. And I mentioned at the top of the show, watch what they do, not what they say. They haven't done the extension yet. They talked about how urgent the extension was, or how important an extension was to get a offensive coordinator, and yet it never happened. Like I said, if the Steelers end up going into the draft and Mike Tomlin hasn't been extended yet, and there isn't a pick at the quarterback position, if the Steelers don't do well this year, I can see this possibly being Tomlin's last ride. Possibly. I mean, who knows? The Steelers they seem to be putting a really, really good team right now. Free agency has been amazing. Khan has done an amazing work going back to last season. Even the free agents that were acquired last year, unfortunately, some of the middle linebackers went down with injury. But then you look at the draft that he was able to do and all the players that came out of there. And now this free agency up to this point, which is just week 1. I mean, bravo. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I think this team is going to be capable. It's going to be capable to do some damage. Now you have a team, in my opinion, that isn't, I don't think they're going to be picked fourth in the AFC North or be looked at as fourth in the AFC North by a long shot. I mean, the other teams in the North are really good. So there's going to be that competition, but I think the Steelers are in a better position to do some more damage now. Larry Brown says he never should have been drafted. Mason should have gotten the chance to start from the beginning of last year. I agree. And that's kind of what my stance was. My stance was that give Mason the opportunity, not because I think he deserves it or he waited long enough or any of those type of things. I felt that at that moment, he didn't have a losing record. He had done some good things. He had more touchdowns and interceptions, more than one touchdown a game. And, I felt that in those moments, he didn't lose any games. I thought that if the quarterback class was better, I wouldn't have been opposed to it. It wasn't a situation where I thought that, no matter who was there, give Mason the opportunity. There was nobody in the draft as quarterback that I thought was leaps and bounds going to be the guy. I didn't see a franchise guy there. And even in free agency, the Steelers went out there and got Mitch Trubisky. I learned a lesson that year, not to make fun of or tease my buddies. I have a buddy of mine who's a Saints fan, and as free agency was approaching, I was giving him some hell and telling him that they were going to be signing Mitch Trubisky because they needed a quarterback. Sure enough, the Pittsburgh Steelers go and sign him. And then draft comes around, and I tell my buddy Chris, who's a Saints fan, I'm like, I hear you're going to get Kenny Pickett. Are you guys going to be able to handle that? And, it was a joke. And next thing you know, the Steelers end up drafting him. So it is what it is. But I'm excited for this year. I think that, this team's getting built very well. But this is going to be it for me, guys. I appreciate everybody that's joined in. Please hit that like and subscribe. What's up, Devin? I'm doing well, my man. Doing well. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're okay. I saw your video earlier. I got a Kenny Pickett jersey too. I got to figure out what I got to do with. But I hope everybody's doing well. You guys have a great night. I'll be back on. I'll probably do something over the weekend as far as breaking down some more film. I'll probably break down a little bit of Patrick Queen, put that out there. It's some all 22 stuff. You don't want to miss it. So if you haven't checked it, go check that stuff out. Notorious TBG says, Steelers country. Let's ride. You know it. Peace out, guys.